This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
On China's annual tomb sweeping day, millions take time out to remember those who have died from the coronavirus. Johnson & Johnson to embark on vaccine trials in South Africa. And 4 soldiers and 63 terrorists killed in Niger clash. Hello and a very warm welcome to Africa Live here on CGTN. I'm Mahia Mutua in Nairobi. Here's what else is coming up. In business, a Nigerian startup trains SMEs on how to expand their businesses. And in sport, Africa's motocross governing body, the latest to pull the plug on this year's continental events. Well, let's begin the hour in China, where the country is in national mourning today to remember those who've lost their lives to COVID-19, especially those who did so while trying to save others. Earlier this morning, people across the nation observed 3 minutes of silence. National flags have been lowered to half-mast. It marked the first national mourning for a public health incident and the 4th overall since the founding of the People's Republic of China. Lucy Rui has more.
Sirens ring out for those who have died from COVID-19. 3 months of fighting the epidemic has seen more than 3,000 deaths across China. To commemorate those who have died from the disease, public recreational activities were also suspended nationwide. The moment falls on Tomb Sweeping Day, a traditional festival where people in China remember their dead relatives.
The medics were really great. This morning at this moment is very meaningful. As common people, we should not only remember them, but also cooperate with other medics and all the policies of the country.
14 people who lost their lives on the front lines have been honored as martyrs. They include 12 medics who were infected while treating patients. Dr. Li Wenliang is among the honored. He had warned of the virus and cared for patients until he himself contracted the disease. In the city of Wuhan, where the epidemic began, commemorations are also being held.
Those doctors were really great. They sacrificed themselves to save us all.
In China, COVID-19 has proven very difficult to contain, with experts calling it the worst infection in the 70 years of People's Republic of China. Now the pandemic continues to sweep across the world, leaving scars on the shared memory of mankind. It warns us that no one can stay isolated in this now closely connected world. International collaboration, unity, and consolidated efforts are urgently needed. Lu Sirui, CGTN, Beijing.
Now, Wuhan, where the outbreak began, has also been the worst hit city in China. It has been on lockdown since late January. Several thousand people have lost their lives, including medical workers. A memorial was held there earlier today. Our reporter Shu Mengqi has more.
A moment of silence dedicated to the memory of those who lost their lives fighting the novel coronavirus.
Because of the contagious nature of the coronavirus, funeral traditions around the world have been cut short or abandoned. Today on Qingming Festival, however, nationwide mourning is finally giving many Chinese people the much-needed chance to honor the dead and grieve their loss.
In Wuhan, the epicenter of China's coronavirus outbreak, the death toll, according to officials, reached 2,567 as of April the 3rd. Those who lost their own battles with the virus while fighting the epidemic at their posts have been honored as martyrs.
I feel really bad because many of those who sacrificed their lives during the outbreak were still quite young.
I'm here to pay my respects and offer a silent tribute.
Among the ceremony's attendees are family members of the deceased, delegates of medical professionals, the police, community workers, volunteers, as well as government officials. And while mourning the dead, different groups have also expressed their determination to carry on the fight.
I think it is more about inheriting their unfinished will, to work harder and fulfill our duties in guarding and caring for the residents. We have a few remaining medical teams in the designated hospitals tackling the thorny treatment of critically ill patients. Many are still in dangerous condition, so we need to continue our efforts and relieve them of their sufferings.
On Saturday morning, life in the city was also brought to a halt as people stood in silence to pay tribute. Shimengqi, CGTN, Wuhan.
Well, let's now look at the latest figures on the COVID-19 pandemic. France has reported a surge in confirmed cases over a 24-hour period. More than 6,000 people have died so far, taking the country's tally past 83,000. The number of confirmed cases globally has now surpassed 1.1 million. Close to 59,000 people have died. With over 278,000 confirmed cases, the United States has more than double any other country. It reported more than 32,000 new cases in the past 24 hours. More than half of all COVID-19 cases are in Europe, with Italy and Spain the worst affected. The Chinese mainland reported 19 new infections on Friday. All but one were imported cases. Well, let's now get the numbers and figures in Africa showing the spread of the coronavirus across the continent. Africa continues to confirm more cases, even as many countries scale up their response measures. Now, most African countries have shut their borders, closed schools, and banned public gatherings to combat the virus. Some have even gone into a full or partial lockdown. Let's now take a look at the numbers by region on the continent. In North Africa, Algeria still has the highest number of coronavirus cases. Egypt follows closely, while Sudan maintains the lowest tally. West African countries continue to report new cases. Burkina Faso currently has the most reported cases. Togo has joined other countries in putting in place lockdown measures. An indefinite curfew from 7 p.m. to 6 a.m. local time has been put in place. Togolese authorities have created a 5,000-member special anti-pandemic task force to enforce the special measures as the country goes into lockdown. In Central Africa, Cameroon has the most confirmed cases with 509. The DRC, which continues to deal with the Ebola epidemic, has the second highest recorded cases in the region. In East Africa, the region continues to report the lowest number of confirmed cases. Kenya is the only country in the region to have over 100 cases confirmed. Governments are, however, taking stringent measures to stop the spread of COVID-19. Rwanda is already under lockdown, that is until April 19th. And in the south of the continent, South Africa continues to record the highest number of cases. The government is enforcing a 21-day lockdown as well as carrying out mass screening campaigns in an effort to stop the spread of COVID-19. Well, now, multinational pharmaceutical corporation Johnson & Johnson has announced the selection of a lead COVID-19 vaccine candidate. This comes after the candidate demonstrated promise in preclinical testing. J&J has a goal of providing more than 1 billion safe, effective doses of a vaccine globally. The vaccine could roll out to the public by next year. CGTN's Yolisa Njamela has more.
The selection of the lead candidate for a COVID-19 vaccine was done after preclinical research. Through collaborations with scientists at multiple academic institutions, J&J's vaccine constructs were preclinically tested to identify those with the most promise in producing an immune response.
We are now preparing our vaccine candidates to be tested in a first-in-human trial, as we call it. So the first time it will be administered to people. From that, of course, we want to get an idea of the safety of our vaccine and also of its ability to elicit an immune response. And as soon as we have that information, we may enter into what we call an efficacy study. And that is a study to demonstrate that it indeed, if it gives an immune response, whether that immune response will protect against COVID-19.
J&J and the US Biomedical Advanced Research and Development Authority have committed more than $1 billion towards the research and development of the coronavirus vaccine. The company has continuously contributed to the fight against HIV, Ebola, and other viruses.
We indeed built a lot of experience with our HIV vaccine candidate and also with our Ebola vaccine. And the similarity between the programs, so between those two and the one for the corona vaccine, is the platform. So we sort of present the virus-specific part in something that we always use.
J&J says it will also scale up its manufacturing facilities around the world.
Currently, we already have a pilot or a launch facility available where we can manufacture at 1,000-liter scale, and that would give production of 300 million doses per year. But of course, on a world population of 7 billion, that's far from enough. So that is why we are now expanding with manufacturing capacity on US soil, and in addition to that, exploring possibilities for expansions on other continents to really deliver on our promise that we want to make a vaccine for the world and to guarantee access.
J&J expects to initiate human trials in September of 2020 and anticipates that the first batches of a COVID-19 vaccine could be available for emergency authorization in early 2021. This represents a substantially accelerated time frame in comparison to the typical vaccine development process. The exercise would ordinarily take 5 years, but the company believes that at a critical time like this, with what humanity is facing, processes have to be sped up to find a solution to deal with the coronavirus. Yolisa Njamela for CGTN in Johannesburg, South Africa.
Well, staying in South Africa, in and around Cape Town, authorities are on high alert in anticipation of a coronavirus surge in the coming weeks and months. Like the rest of South Africa, the Western Cape is starting the second week of a 3-week-long COVID-19 lockdown to try and curb the spread of the disease. Renee Delcarme with more.
South Africa's health minister has described his country's experience of COVID-19 so far as the calm before the storm. And the City of Cape Town's disaster risk management team says it's the most widespread disaster it's ever had to deal with.
This disaster management service deals with disasters on a weekly basis. There is a fire or a flood or some other localized incident continuously, but we've never had to deal with such a wide-scaled incident as this COVID-19 pandemic.
Since the outbreak of COVID-19, the Disaster Risk Management Operations team has been taking around 4,000 calls a shift. Mostly complaints about people not adhering to the city's lockdown regulations or not practicing social distancing. But city officials say they're trying hard not to arrest people for not complying with the lockdown.
We're not a police state. We're not a country that has a heavy police presence. We have skinny police numbers. We require people to self-regulate. If you start making this a contest of wills between us and them, then them will win. So it is important that we get people to understand why they're doing this, that it's not about obeying a law, but that you're doing this for your own benefit. You're doing this for your sake, your family's sake, your community's sake. If you get sick and die, who will look after your family?
Ideally, we want people to see the big picture. And the big picture is that we could all infect everybody. So we want people to stay home as voluntarily as possible so that we don't extend the lockdown period or we don't have another lockdown period. And I think people need to understand the chances of us extending the lockdown period is very real at the moment, and also the chances of us having another lockdown period could also be real.
The number of COVID-19 patients in and around Cape Town is fairly low at the moment, but with increased testing now being implemented, the number of cases are likely to surge. particularly in the case of local transmissions.
I'd like to encourage our residents to not panic around COVID-19. The city is ready in partnership with provincial government and national government to handle any of the stages of COVID-19.
And it's here in the Strat Room where strategic life and death decisions will be made throughout the city of Cape Town's response to the spread of the devastating novel coronavirus. Renee Dalcom, CGTN, Cape Town, South Africa.
And in Tunisia, the National Security Council has extended the general lockdown period by 2 more weeks. The lockdown started on April 5th. Adnan Shawashi has the latest.
The Ministers of Health, Defense, Interior, Justice, Social Affairs and Trade have informed the head of state about the latest developments on the spread of COVID-19. The meeting also shed light on the social and economic consequences of the general lockdown on millions of people.
I call for a more rigorous implementation of the measures and a change in methodology to avoid the shortcomings noted during the previous period.
The National Security Council also called for action to combat speculation, stressing the need to revise the penal code.
Those who speculate and monopolize food in this difficult period must be treated as war criminals. The state will impose the most severe penalties on those who exploit the condition of Tunisians by stockpiling foodstuffs. They'll be held to account, whoever they may be.
The country's Premier Yassir Farfer pointed out that Tunisia has enough medicines to treat about 20,000 people infected with the virus, in addition to ICU beds, isolation centers, protective equipment and screening tests that will allow nearly 400,000 tests to be carried out.
The evolution of the epidemiological situation shows a rapid spread of the virus in several regions of the country, hence the importance of complying with the general lockdown. We can isolate the virus and treat infected people if all Tunisians respect the strict prevention measures.
The National Security Council announced that Tunisia has the necessary means to deal with all possible disaster scenarios through proactive national plans.
Prime Minister Yassir Farfer has called on all governors to closely monitor the situation of vulnerable groups, as well as the poor and needy people who are facing financial difficulties in the exceptional circumstances imposed by the national plan to combat the spread of coronavirus. Adnan Shawashi, CGTN, Tunis.
Well, another sad milestone in the United States, the largest number of deaths in a single day. That's over 1,000 American lives. That brings the total number above 7,000 as the White House releases new guidance on what the public should be wearing to help protect themselves. CGTN's Nathan King reports.
After much debate, US government officials are finally recommending facial coverings for Americans when they are outside.
The CDC is advising the use of non-medical cloth face covering as an additional voluntary public health measures.
The choice of words is important. They're trying not to use the word masks as they're in short supply and needed by frontline healthcare workers. And the scramble for equipment, including masks, continues, dividing the US federal government and states hit hardest by COVID-19.
Help the place that has the crisis.
New York's governor criticized the White House while thanking one of China's biggest companies.
We're still trying to buy from China. We're working with Alibaba, which has been very, very helpful to us. I spoke to Jack Ma and Mike Evans, who is the president, and they have been personally gracious and very, very helpful in trying to get us to source material from China.
And after being ordered by the White House not to export N95 masks, the major manufacturer here in the US, 3M, pushed back, saying orders from Canada, Latin America and elsewhere were needed for frontline healthcare workers, and banning exports could backfire on the United States as it tries to import medical supplies. Well, the White House has gone ahead and banned any export of these masks and other medical equipment. The scramble for supplies continues as the virus continues to spread. Nathan King, CGTN, at the White House.
While in Europe, the number of confirmed cases continues to swell, with some countries preparing for a major surge in the coming days. Here's a trio of reports from the UK, Russia, and first, Spain.
Everyone has their own ways of coping with this quarantine, with this lockdown, with this state of emergency. There's actually a guy who lives opposite me who does a DJ set every evening in an effort to entertain all the people that are queuing up for a nearby supermarket. So the lockdown has almost become the new normal, and it looks like it may be extended now to April the 26th. The Prime Minister, Pedro Sanchez, is going to have talks this weekend with his political opponents to try and thrash out a deal. The restrictions on that lockdown may well be eased, so allowing people possibly to go out for exercise, which is something that's been done in France and in the UK.
This is an important milestone for the UK. It's the first field hospital to open, one of many more. There are field hospitals and morgues planned in former convention centres and airports across the country. A real indication that without this sort of massive injection of resources, the National Health Service in the UK would not have been able to deal with this crisis. And the British Prime Minister Boris Johnson, it sounds as though he'll be self-isolating for a few more days, as we'll hear in this soundbite from him.
Hi folks, quick update from me on the campaign against coronavirus. First of all, in my own case, although I'm feeling better and I've done my 7 days of isolation, alas, I still have one of the symptoms, a minor symptom of I still have a temperature, and so in accordance with government advice, I must continue my self-isolation until that symptom itself goes.
And earlier this week, the Russian State Duma, the lower house of parliament, pushed through a package of measures that would criminalize in some cases and provide fines for certain people in others for violations of quarantine and for spreading what they call fake news, deliberately misinforming the public about the coronavirus. And we're seeing some certain fines for those sort of crimes that they're being outlined under the Duma legislation, as well as possible jail sentence if it were to lead to somebody's death. We're also seeing that anyone who breaks quarantine, if they are to contract that disease and spread it to another person, if that results in someone else's death, that could lead to 7 years in prison as well.
Over 10 days after calling for a global ceasefire, UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres once again reiterated his call. The UN Secretary General urged world leaders to focus on combating COVID-19. His call has been endorsed by 70 member states, regional partners, non-state actors and others. Guterres also touched on the Libyan conflict. The country has reported 17 cases of the coronavirus, but fighting continues to hamper relief efforts.
But my objective now is to make sure that the ceasefire, whose technical aspects were agreed by the representatives of both sides but not signed, that ceasefire is implemented. We must stop this war. This war has had devastating economic and social consequences for the country, has made people suffer in a terrible way, and this war is now not allowing the response to COVID-19 to take place in Libya, what could have catastrophic consequences too. This is the moment to stop the war.
You're watching Africa Live here on CGTN. Here's what's coming up on the program. 4 soldiers and 63 terrorists killed in Niger clash.
You're watching breaking news on CGTN.
Welcome back. Now, 4 Nigerian soldiers have been killed following fighting with militants. The attack took place in the Tillaberi region. Niger's Ministry of Defense said in a statement that 63 militants were killed. The Tillaberi region borders both Mali and Burkina Faso. 3 separate attacks in December and January killed 174 soldiers. The Sahel continues to battle insecurity caused by militant groups. Now, a lack of information and limited access to land are among the challenges young Zimbabweans face when trying to enter the agricultural field. The government, however, is looking to help more young people join the field. Mahia Mutua tells us more.
As an agro-based economy, farming is seen as Zimbabwe's future. Yet those expected to shape it say they are being deprived of opportunities.
Yes, I would be interested in farming as a career. That is, if I'm given the opportunity. I think as young people, we do not know much about farming, especially for those who grew up in towns. We do not know so many things about farming.
Food production has recently been in a slump, largely due to erratic weather, but also because of a flight of productive labor.
Young people from the rural areas think that they are missing out on opportunities in the capital city, so they end up flocking here, yet there is no employment. And when they all come here, then there is no one left to work the land in the rural areas.
Zimbabwe is battling to debunk the stereotype that a life in the fields is for the elderly and rural. One way to make farming more attractive and to increase opportunities for youth participation is to make use of new technology, which will also ramp up production. The government is trying to capacitate young people.
What we see to be the way out for young people is the right training. You will know that we have vocational training centers within the Ministry of Youth. We have training centers within the Ministry of Agriculture. I think that's where we need to start, to train our young people so that they are entrepreneurs in the agriculture field.
That should hopefully lead to more young farmers and a self-sufficient Zimbabwe. Mahia Mutua, CGTN, Harare, Zimbabwe.
The World Food Programme is warning of worsening food challenges in the African Sahel region as humanitarian aid reduces due to the ongoing coronavirus pandemic. According to the UN body, Mali and Burkina Faso are the most affected nations in that region.
As the world combats the spread of the coronavirus, many countries have closed their borders while many flights are grounded. In the Sahel region, the spread of COVID-19 is riding on an already bad situation. There is a worsening state of militancy and food challenges. The World Food Programme warns that humanitarian supplies are reducing.
Some of the bigger companies, and indeed the main suppliers globally, are in countries that are currently under strict confinement and a very reduced level of production. A lot of the nutritious products are produced in India or France, for example, where factories have had to reduce or close or reduce significantly their production. We have big concerns on this, and our supply chain colleagues, together with UNICEF, are looking at locally available enriched foods to complement this.
For the lean season, the upcoming months, June to September, the analysis concluded that we are going from 10.8 million people declared food insecure last year, 2019, to 19.1 million people in 2020. This is an increase of 77% from last year, and it's unprecedented.
WFP experts also say Mali and Burkina Faso could be the most affected, since the number of internally displaced persons has been increasing in the recent past.
Burkina Faso is now, if not the first, at least one of the most or the fastest growing displaced population crisis in the world. It's a country that virtually had no IDPs, internally displaced populations, 18 months ago, and now the latest official figures are in excess of 800,000 people displaced.
The spread of the coronavirus is also exerting pressure on humanitarian aid agencies as they seek to achieve primary measures to protect both locals and aid workers.
We need to limit the number of people that gather. So we need to fragment the number of sites of distribution. The maximum numbers vary from one country to the other, but in general, not more than 50 people can be gathered. And even when those people can be gathered, we are implementing standard operating procedures to minimize the transmission of the disease. So there's a temperature check for all people coming into the distribution sites. And we have to respect 1 meter between every individual coming to get the food assistance.
Years of climate change-related conditions have affected food production in the Sahel. This has lately led to conflicts between herding and farming communities over grazing land. Militant groups affiliated to ISIL and Al-Qaeda networks have exploited these tensions to entrench themselves in the region. Daniela Pearson, CGTN.
Well, we're coming up on the business news here on Africa Live. Here's what's coming your way. Nigeria's startup to train SMEs on expanding their businesses. And we'll tell you about the Tunisian designer starting production of face masks as demand grows in the country.
Images may appear to be identical, but looks can be deceiving. The difference is not always obvious. It has to be discovered. There are always different sides to a story. We put the focus on the details. To see more, to understand better. CGTN. See the difference.
Welcome to the business. Let's start in Nigeria, where for the past 4 years, a startup academy there has been teaching entrepreneurs how to build sustainable businesses. And beyond structural support and business education, Itzinia has been training them on how to access government loans to expand their businesses. CGTN's Deji Badmus tells us more.
A typical session for young entrepreneurs underway at the Itzinia Startup Academy. They're taking through all the rudiments of starting a business and sustaining it. Short for Itzinia, Itzinia Startup Academy trains about 10 entrepreneurs at a time, 4 times a year, fortifying them with all they need to be successful. Founded by a Swede and franchised in Nigeria in 2016, Itzinia is a backbone for quite a number of startups in Nigeria, helping them to develop and grow their business.
People had good ideas, but they had very bad structures or foundations. And we felt with the proper coaching and training, we would have better businesses that would have the right foundation to grow.
Ngak says Itzinia was essentially founded to fix the projection that 70% of businesses are bound to fail. So they've been providing entrepreneurship education to business founders in Nigeria, introducing them to an ecosystem of other innovative minds with access to business development experts and coaches. But beyond providing help for business structures, Itzinia also teaches entrepreneurs how to access the Central Bank of Nigeria's loans to enable them scale.
The CBN is partnering with Itzinia through the NISAL Microfinance Bank to train entrepreneurs who are planning to get loan from the microfinance bank to grow their SMEs. Itzinia gives them foundational training to help them understand how to use these loans and what to use them for, and also to help them build capacity that would enable them pay back the loan to the bank.
You can never have...
Zachary Fakir is a fish farmer. He's been at Itzinia Startup Academy for about 3 months now. He says with all he's learnt here, he's ready to hit the ground running.
I know exactly what to do from 1 naira to 50 million naira now with what I've learned here. So basically, I'm ready. Once I get the loan, I will know how to apply and how to get to the last and also get results and also pay back.
In the past 4 years, Itzinia has trained over 180 entrepreneurs, mainly from the north of the country. They're aiming to help even more by building a larger hub to include incubator, accelerator, and business support services. Deji Badmus, CGTN, Abuja, Nigeria.
Now in Tunisia, following the coronavirus pandemic and the explosion in demand for surgical masks, one fashion designer has turned her atelier into a workshop to produce face masks. Here, around 2,000 medical masks are dispatched daily to hospitals in need. Alexandria Majala has more.
Kalaud Gusmi has been a fashion designer for years. Her small atelier is based in Tunis, Tunisia's capital. After the COVID-19 pandemic hit, the North African nation was hit by a shortage of face masks. It was then that the designer decided to take a break from the fashion world to produce hundreds of face masks.
Because of the spread of the coronavirus, face masks are not available at pharmacies. I thought I can use my atelier to produce these masks at the same time by utilizing my biology degree in order to make these masks available in pharmacies and hospitals.
Gusmi's masks are made from durable fabric and are reusable. She dispatches the products daily to hospitals and pharmacies struggling to match demand. She started making the masks very recently and financed the project herself.
This is an example of the face masks we produce. We use non-woven fabric to make them. As you can see, there are 2 layers so that the masks are more effective. The material itself is breathable as it has small openings and an internal layer functioning as a protective shield. This is more effective than the masks sold at pharmacies because the latter is used once, then discarded. We can wash this mask and reuse it.
Different organizations have already caught wind of the social enterprise and pitched in to fund the small workshop of 30 tailors. So far, she has distributed 8,000 masks. Her workshop churns out between 1,000 to 1,500 masks every day. The goal is to produce more than 10,000 masks in upcoming weeks. Tunisia, which suffers from limited health infrastructure, is fighting to contain the outbreak after it said it had over 275 cases and 8 deaths. Alexandria Majala for CGTN.
South Africa's Department of Agriculture has set aside a package of $67 million to address effects of COVID-19 and ensure sustainable food production after the pandemic. Agriculture Minister Toko Didiza says while several businesses will be affected, the agriculture and food supply sectors will remain operational during the lockdown. Yolisa Njamela with more.
My fellow South Africans,
in a bid to stop the spread of the virus, President Cyril Ramaphosa announced a 21-day lockdown, but some industries have to continue to function, like the agriculture sector. Exports and imports of critical agriculture commodities and the logistical measures will continue during the lockdown period to ensure global and national food security. This will apply to the entire food value chain, from farm-related operations, agro-processing, and food manufacturing, and all support functions that ensure efficient delivery of the agro-food system.
We do appreciate that there will be stresses to the different producers as well as industry generally in the production sector when it comes to the food industry. We have therefore ensured that export and import will continue, and we have advised our relevant colleagues, even in the border post, to ensure that the movement of goods should not actually be negatively impacted by this lockdown.
Live auctions of livestock and sale of other agricultural commodities will also continue, but under strict conditions. Government has put aside some money to help the farmers at this critical time.
We will put aside 100 million rands to the land bank to ensure that it cushions the farmers, particularly those who have got loans and are in distress. We have also put aside 1.2 billion to assist smallholder farmers to ensure that they continue with the production.
Food price monitoring will be conducted on critical food basket commodities, and reports will be given to the nation on a regular basis. Minister Didiza says agricultural production in all its forms will remain uncompromised. She says food security is particularly important at a critical time like this. Yolisa Njamela for CGTN in Pretoria, South Africa.
And here's what's coming up in the sport. Africa's motocross governing body becomes the latest to pull the plug on this year's continental events. Now, the coronavirus pandemic continues to take a toll on sports, with African motocross governing body now the latest to pull the plug on this year's